Hello, my name is Martin Kemp. I'm Emeritus Professor of the History of Art at University of Oxford and have spent a good deal of time looking at Leonardo da Vinci. He's obviously admirable in all this range of things he does: painting, architecture, sculpture, anatomy, physics, geology, etc., etc. There's hardly any range of the human sciences which he didn't touch on productively to some extent. So he's obviously a remarkable figure, known as a polymath. I've coined a word and said he's really actually a monomath. That's to say he sees all these diverse areas which we separate out into discrete disciplines, all with their own jargons, their own ways of proceeding. He doesn't separate these out. He sees them as a single unified field, a field of the knowledge of human beings, the knowledge of nature, and these are the same areas of knowledge. They're not essentially separate categories of knowledge. So we can look at Leonardo for joined up thinking, which we absolutely need at this present moment in this time of notable crisis. He teaches us to look at things in a more unified way, which we're still not good at doing, and this lack of joined up thinking is pretty catastrophic for the future of the Earth and the future of human beings on it. So he's very relevant to Earth 300. If we look in more specific terms and look at one area of his activity, that is to say his geology and his studies in the body of the Earth, he has a notion of the human body as a lesser world. He calls it a small miniature world, that inside us all the processes of nature which we can see outside are represented on a smaller scale. This is classically, and from ancient Greece, this is the notion of the microcosm. The microcosm, the human body, is a model for the larger world outside. And this fuels a terrifically energetic and remarkably innovative research for how we can work with nature. I've been looking at this very closely recently with the Codex Leicester, so-called, owned by Bill Gates. Very extraordinary compilation of what we can do with water, how we can work with water. And he says it won't be pushed around. In order to be a good engineer of watery things, we have to work with nature itself and with how nature works. So this is an absolutely fundamental lesson which we need to take on board, that we can't say we are masters of nature. That clearly isn't the case. And the notion of the lesser world and the greater world and the integration of these two works absolutely amazingly if we set it in our present context.
Dear citizens of planet Earth, it gives me great pleasure as the director of the Earth Observatory of Singapore at Nanyang Technological University to say a few words about the Earth 300 Impact Talks. This is an important event for the future of climate science in Singapore and beyond. There has never been a more important time to be an Earth scientist. As the director of the Earth Observatory, I have on many occasions spoken about the existential threat of climate change and sustainability. I have spoken to fellow academics, from chairs to deans, from provosts to presidents, both at home and abroad. I have spoken to government officials, to industry, to businesses, to schools. After explaining the facts, the driving processes, climate projections, and that we are approaching a tipping point beyond which there is no return, I am always asked about the hope for the future. I believe that of all the challenges that we face, climate change is the one that will define the contours of this century more dramatically than any others. I believe that there is something of being too late. When it comes to climate change and sustainability, the hour is upon us. But armed with the education of how the Earth works, if we act boldly and swiftly, if we set aside our political interests in the favour of the air that the young people will breathe, the food that they will eat, and the water that they will drink. If we think about them and their hopes and their dreams, if we act boldly, it won't be too late. Only then can we leave a world behind that is worthy of our children, where there is reduced conflict and greater cooperation. A world marked not by human suffering, but by human progress. Consider the role of Earth 300, a catalyst to inspire an era of climate and environmental innovation. The concept of Earth 300 reminds me of the mission to put a man on the moon. When President John F. Kennedy said, "We chose to go to the moon," in 1962, he wanted it done by the end of the decade. At that time, much of the expertise and machinery that would allow humans to walk on the moon did not exist. We are all living together on a single planet, which is threatened by our own actions. Every person, every community, every country must respond to the existential threat of climate change, as if our lives depended upon it, because they do. Over to you.
My name is Richard Dunn, and I am CEO of the Harmony Project. The Harmony Project's main purpose is to transform education to a much more interdisciplinary, integrated approach to learning. The Harmony Project's inspiration has come from a book written by the Prince of Wales entitled Harmony, in which he explores how our connection to nature and its universal eternal laws and principles can help us to learn to live in a more sustainable way. So the Harmony Project is looking to see how these principles of interdependence, cycles, diversity, adaptation and health can inform a new way of learning. This work was developed in a state primary school where I was head teacher, and now we're sharing this work widely across schools and other education settings, both in the UK and around the world. And our hope is that through this much more interdisciplinary, integrated approach, children will be better able and equipped to make sense of the world and their place in it. So through the Earth 300 event, I hope to be able to explain how these principles work, why they are so important to us at this time in terms of a sustainable future, and how we can help our young people to develop an understanding of these principles so that they can live a healthy, sustainable life in a healthy, sustainable world. It is in effect a philosophy for life. So I look forward to seeing you at the session at Earth 300 soon. Thank you.
Dear all, welcome to the EHL campus in Singapore. 128 years young, EHL has now grown into the leading global hospitality and service management education provider. We are thrilled to have been able to open our campus in Singapore, and we are proud to participate in Earth 300's initiative and hosting today's event. Being a global leader comes with responsibility. Due to their nature, the hospitality and service industries have a significant impact on our environment. Carbon emissions resulting from travels, also reduced during the COVID-19 crisis, remain a cause of concern, which is being addressed worldwide. As an education institution, it is our responsibility to ensure the highest standards for ourselves, since, by so doing, we contribute to setting them for the industries that we serve. Indeed, it is our duty to prepare our future leaders to be mindful and conscious of the impact of the actions they take on a daily basis. Sustainability is part of EHL's DNA. Our faculty integrates this key subject in the courses they teach and the research they conduct, where we aim at dedicating 25% of the projects to sustainability topics. In our curriculum, the best example is our preparatory year, during which students are exposed to concrete sustainability methods throughout the value chain. In addition, during the bachelor years, they will be taught courses in corporate sustainability or business ethics, for example. Last but not least, a series of dedicated short courses will be launched on our Singapore campus as of 2022. This is great, but we want to contribute beyond education, which is why sustainability is a central component of our students' experience on and off our campuses. Sustainability is not a standalone notion. On the contrary, it has to be integrated in multidisciplinary programs in all possible areas and functions of EHL Education Group, which is why our approach is holistic. EHL Group sustainability strategy is based on the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals and encompasses 4 main areas: education, communities, people, and environment. Most of all, we create opportunities for students to contribute to our bold objectives by putting into place cross-fertilization processes between them, our faculty, and our startups, by exposing them to a new pedagogical garden where they can learn about the importance of growing and using local food systems, and by involving them in students' business projects to support not-for-profit organizations, sustainability, and diversity. But we don't want to stop there. The environment and climate challenges we face are not debatable. We have no other choice than walk the talk and implement concrete and bold actions to reduce our own impact as a group so that sustainability becomes self-evident to ourselves and our students' mindsets. And for that, we commit to reporting progress with the utmost transparency and be held accountable for the achievement of these commitments.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. The great polymath and astronaut F. Story Musgrave once said that nature draws curves, only man draws lines. You see, this is a very important point to understand if we're going to shed a new light on our planetary crisis, if we're going to learn how to tackle and even solve the climate crisis. It's an issue that is on the minds of academics and professional experts. We know that there is an increasing amount of awareness and consciousness about our planetary condition. We know that academics and professionals are in their own unique ways making useful contributions, are trying to understand the problem better. We as individuals are trying to do more to help ourselves help the planet, our home. The problem lies in the fact that these silos that we have built within academia, within the professional world, within government and politics, within the commercial space, have really served to reinforce a lack of understanding about climate change. Why is that? Because when we silo off each area of knowledge or each area of expertise, we do that to our detriment. We do that to the detriment of a fuller understanding of a complex problem. You see, a complex problem requires systems thinking, a kind of thinking that appreciates and acknowledges the interconnectedness of these different facets. Of course, the climate crisis is a systems problem. Our planet is a system. There are many moving parts, each relying on one another, each affecting one another, many of which are unpredictable, are non-linear. So in order to make significant breakthroughs in each of these, in order to make significant breakthroughs so that we might attain or achieve the UN sustainability goals, the important thing is for us to work together, collaboratively, in a manner that fosters creativity, fosters open-mindedness, fosters a greater understanding of one another's disciplines, one another's areas of expertise, and also trying to look at the whole problem more holistically, in a more rounded way, in a way that where government and politics understand science better, where science understands the arts better, where academia understands business better, and vice versa. If we were to do this in a manner that is open and in a manner that's more sincere, we would achieve great things. And this is why Earth 300 is such an important organization. It's an organization that fosters this kind of systems thinking, this kind of multidisciplinarity, and it understands fully that the answer or the solution to this complex planetary challenge that we have is one that requires us all to come together. All to come together to work in harmony, with mutual respect, with a common purpose. This is something lacking today, which is why I fully welcome the Earth 300 project, and which is why I feel proud to be a part of it. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Dr. Ash Brockwell. I'm an associate professor at the London Interdisciplinary School, working on ecology, some social science methods, some ethnobiology, a little bit of chemistry, and various other bits and pieces. So interdisciplinarity is really crucial when you're talking about sustainability. And ecological systems have always been complex, and the interrelated ecological emergencies that we're facing as a global community are even more complex. They're wicked problems in the sense that they're constantly evolving. There's no right answer. Everything is non-linear, and a small change over here can make a huge difference over there. So in that sense, multidisciplinary work, or beyond that interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary work, is more or less a given. Because to imagine that any of these issues can be tackled by just ecologists or just anthropologists or even just artists would be like trying to cook a 4-course meal when you've only got one ingredient. My word of the year is mind shifts, which my spell checker doesn't like. It keeps underlining it in red and trying to tell me I mean mindsets. Neuroscience tells us that lifelong learning is a biological reality, that neuroplasticity doesn't stop when you get to a certain age, that the human brain is constantly rewiring itself, and not just in response to physical injury, but mental events too. So no, I don't mean mindsets, because people don't change their thinking by clicking from one fixed state to another. It's a continuous process of adaptation and shifting and making new connections. So there's a mind shift going on in Western education that's been going on for decades now, but it's increasingly picking up speed. And that's the recognition of how interconnected everything is and how much damage we're doing by trying to break life down into subjects and disciplines and treat them as if they were all unrelated. Of course, Indigenous communities around the world have always known about the interconnectedness of everything, and that awareness has always been woven through everything. Not just their education, but their spirituality, their food production, their healthcare, their oral literature, even what we might refer to now as their conservation practices. You can't draw a line around any one of those things and separate it out from all the others. And because of the centuries of colonial oppression that made a lot of those practices illegal, and all the intergenerational trauma that came with it, and more recently cultural appropriation and New Age romanticism, it's a really sensitive area where we as white people need to tread carefully. We don't want to be those white guys clambering all over the sacred rock without permission and making everything worse. But it's about respect, it's about listening, it's about finding the principles that underpin Indigenous ways of knowing and being, and then working out how we can apply those principles in new contexts through partnerships and networks. I've recently been reading Sand Talk by the Aboriginal author Tyson Yunkaporta, and what he gives us is exactly that, not the what, but the how of Indigenous knowledges. It's about mind shifts, not just from separation to interconnectedness, but also from monocultures to diversity, from the individual to the collective, and from taking a static view to thinking about complex dynamic systems and how they're adapting. It's fascinating and it's crucial for human survival. And so in my talk, I'll be sharing some ideas around these mind shifts and the insights that we can gain about them from different disciplines.